Much like recent years, 2024 has been another banner year for horror, bringing some absolutely brilliant terrors to the silver screen. And as so often the case with the horror genre, many of those impressive pictures brought some fantastic jump scares with them as well. Heck, even some of 2024's most disappointing horror films still at least managed to have a good scare or two in amongst the dross. Yes, jump scares can be way too lazily relied on and be totally gimmicky, but when done right, they'll stay with an audience long after that film has rolled to a close, and that was certainly the case for several of this year's horror output. So with that in mind, I'm Andrew from What Culture Horror, and here are the 10 best jump scares from 2024's biggest horror movies. Number 10, a shocking revelation. Don't move. This Netflix offering opens with Iris, a grieving woman preparing to take her own life by jumping off a cliff, only to be stopped by a stranger named Richard. Richard's words start to give Iris hope, and she decides to give life another chance. However, Iris becomes a little concerned when she notices Richard is holding an umbrella, on a day where there isn't a single cloud in the sky. Before Iris has a chance to react, Richard electrocutes her with a device hidden in the umbrella's handle, completely blindsiding the audience. Making this attack look all the more unnatural and frightening, several frames are removed when Richard lunges at Iris, plus there's an absolutely ear-splitting sound effect to add to just how perfectly executed this shocking moment is. Number 9, Buster Gets Busted, Maxxxine. The final leg of Ty West's X-trilogy, Maxxxine maybe wasn't quite up to the lofty standards of its two predecessors, but it was decent enough as we pick things up with ex-survivor Maxxxine Minx eager to make the switch from adult movies to the Hollywood mainstream. Of course, all of this takes place when tension in the city is high due to a serial killer being on the loose. Maxxxine has thankfully dealt with her fair share of psychos in the past, so she knows how to handle herself when she's cornered in an alleyway by a switchblade-wielding lunatic dressed as Buster Keaton, turning the tables on this attacker by pointing a gun at him and forcing him to strip naked and lie on the ground. Referencing Pearl's fate in X, Maxxxine lets the fella know how she crushed the skull of the last person who tried to kill her. Then, as the camera lingers on Buster, and we expect the same fate for him, the shock here comes when Maxxxine instead slams her boot into the man's balls, bursting them like grapes. Yep, no thank you. Number 8, The Rooftop Walker, Immaculate. Michael Mohan's religious horror Immaculate revolves around Cecilia, a newly converted nun who moves into an Italian convent hoping to find her true calling in life. After becoming pregnant despite never having sex, Cecilia starts to be viewed as a Virgin Mary type figure by the sisters there. Though when she notices strange activities in the convent, she worries something demonic is growing inside her. Immaculate unfortunately relies too much on forced shocks, making them more annoying than frightening. Still, there is one jump scare that nicely hits the mark. That comes when Cecilia is walking through the cloister and you can just about see a nun, Isabel, on a rooftop in the distance. The background here is deliberately unfocused, so it's a little hard to spot it on a first viewing, which makes it all the more startling when Isabel plummets to the ground, a moment so subtle but so brutally abrupt. Number 7, Heads Up Dean, Abigail. Inspired by Dracula's daughter, horror comedy Abigail follows a group of mercenaries who kidnap a tiny ballerina called Abigail, completely oblivious to the fact that Abigail, yep, she's a vampire. Of course, it doesn't take long for Abigail to start biting necks and causing bloody murder. And while there are plenty of delightfully violent kills here, the most shocking is the very first one. Well, that would be Dean, who's attacked by an unseen assailant before being dragged off screen. When the hacker of the group, Sammy, goes downstairs to look for Dean, she finds him sitting at a table. For us, the audience, it's pretty obvious that Dean is dead, but the way it's revealed to Sammy is great. Dean's head flopping off his shoulders, causing Sammy to instinctively grab it and realise, yep, she's staring at a dismembered body. Number 6, Paul's reappearance, Smile 2. Parker Finn's smile was one of the most unsettling horrors of 2020, with a grinning demon front and centre to cause all kinds of chaos. And much like that first film, Smile 2 likewise contains its fair share of memorable jump scares, with one in particular nicely standing out. Cursed by the Smile entity, Grammy-winning pop star Sky notices the smirking demon out in the audience at a charity event, where it's taken the form of her dead boyfriend Paul. As Paul arrives on the podium, Sky becomes increasingly agitated, as she would do, causing her to shut her eyes and just hope for the best. And when she opens her eyes, Paul, he's strangely nowhere to be seen. However, just as Sky breathes that sigh of relief, a bloody Paul grabs her from behind, still beaming ear to ear. Though this scene is superb on a technical level, making it all the more eerie is the impeccable casting of Ray Nicholson as Paul. Much like his legendary father Jack, Ray, yeah, he's got one hell of a sinister smile at his disposal. Number 5. Scarecrow in the Shower, The Strangers Chapter 1. While The Strangers Chapter 1 was sadly, quite a disappointment for fans of the previous two movies, myself included, the first leg of Renny Harlin's Strangers trilogy did at least have a few decent scares in it. Sure, some of those scares did feel a little lazily stolen from the first Strangers movie, but there is one shower set sequence that really does stand out from the rest. Here, our lead female, Maya, is the one having a shower while her boyfriend is headed out to the nearby town. As we get a long shot of Maya washing her hair, she at one point takes a step forward, where we see that she's being watched from behind the shower glass by Scarecrow, or, the creepy fella previously known as simply Man in the Mask in the previous two Strangers pictures. While we get to see Scarecrow, Maya herself, nope, she does not, making this all the more disturbing. Now, let's just cross our fingers and hope the already filmed Strangers Chapters 2 and 3 are at least better than this disappointing first film of the trilogy. Number 4. The Android Wakes Up, Alien Romulus. After a few opinion-splitting movies, and that's being polite, Fede Alvarez's Alien Romulus came pretty darn close to recapturing some of the true spirit of the Alien franchise. Simply going back to basics, relying on practical effects, actually giving us fleshed out characters, and doing its best to craft some eerie atmospheric tension. Away from the usual xenomorph threat though, Romulus's most heart-thumping moment actually involves a damaged android. As Rain attempts to retrieve a chip from the android in order to override a lockdown, one of her pals messes around with an X-ray device. Yeah, cheers mate, and that obviously momentarily distracts Rain. Of course, since she's not paying attention, Rain is then totally unprepared when the supposedly deactivated robot grabs her arm and gives her the fright of her life. Given how the characters had narrowly escaped a horde of facehuggers only a minute earlier, it felt like this scene would serve as a brief moment of respite. But that was clearly not the case, as this android sprung back to life. Number 3. The Claw, The First Omen. Hands up, who was expecting a genuinely good movie when The First Omen was first announced? Yeah, not me, absolutely not me, but man, Kasia Stevenson's Omen prequel has been an absolute cracker, managing to nicely expand on the franchise's existing lore in truly terrifying fashion. That expansion centers around Margaret, a religious novice who grows suspicious of the nuns and priests she's working with in Rome. After discovering the facility takes in women who've fallen pregnant outside of marriage, Margaret heads into a secret chamber where one such woman is giving birth. And yeah, it's certainly something, as we see split-second shots of the woman's face, her obscured lower regions, and the frantic personnel on hand. And speaking of hand, just as we get a vivid shot of what appears to be the baby's head crowning, that head, it splits open to reveal a black, bony claw. Number 2. Minnie's appearance, Late Night with the Devil. One of the very, very best horrors of the year, Late Night with the Devil is an absolute delight, starring David Dastmalchian as Jack Delroy, a late-night TV host desperate to boost his sagging ratings by interviewing a supposedly possessed girl on Halloween night. An exceptionally smart film, Late Night with the Devil, it just nicely blends found footage with behind-the-scenes filmmaking and with an overall TV production. And it also shows how jump scares, they do not have to be loud or stretched out to be impactful. Instead, one particularly chilling moment sees Jack studying frame-by-frame footage of the possessed girl, believing he saw a hidden something. It's here where the ghost of Jack's wife Minnie appears behind him in one frame, her hand gently placed on his shoulder. Not just do we get this scare though, for the camera immediately cuts to a close-up of Jack, where we see Minnie's discoloured hand still over his shoulder. Number 1. He's already inside. Oddity. To be fair, a good few moments in Oddity are worthy of a spot on this video, but the one that gets the nod is the film's eerie tent sequence. Oddity opens with Danny being visited by a deranged fella claiming that a mysterious figure has infiltrated her home. Dismissing this to be a load of BS, she swiftly sends that guy on his way. Of course, when Danny realizes that yes, an intruder is in her home, she hides in a tent in her living room, laser focused on the doorway at the front, as that's the only way in for this intruder. Well, or so it seems. You see, as Danny leans forward, a masked figure appears right beside the tent door. Meaning yes, he's been beside the tent the entire time. A simple but effective misdirect made all the more powerful by an ominous blaring sound effect.